The capacity to learn is a gift. The ability to learn is a skill. The willingness to learn is a choice. With the choice of learning, do what you have to do until you can do what you want to do. With these words, welcome you all to ABS Creations by your educationalist, Chandrakala. The future belongs to those who learn more skills and combine them in creative ways, and develop young minds to eradicate poverty by education and develop their nation. An educational channel with moral values. If you have not subscribed the channel, press the bell icon to subscribe it and receive the notification. Thank you. So in this session, we are going to learn about the sectors of Indian economy. Now you can see the pictures. What you can observe it? You can observe the production process. The second picture denotes about distribution of the product, and the third one is the consumption. Production, distribution and consumption. These are the various activities which are carried out by men. So what are these activities called as? These are called as economic activities. These are called as economic activities. So economic activity is nothing but the activities which are carried out by men to satisfy their needs and to earn profit. So these economic activities, depending upon their nature of activity carried out by men, it can be classified into primary sector, secondary sector and the tertiary sector. So depending upon the nature of activity, the economical activity can be classified into primary sector, secondary sector and the tertiary sector. Now we will move on with the primary sector. So what is primary sector? The activities which involve the exploitation of natural resources directly. They are referred to as primary sector. The man completely involves himself in exploiting the natural resources and produce a product or a good. That is what we say it as a primary sector. For example, cotton is cultivated by man within a particular cropping season. To cultivate a cotton, he depends upon the cropping season, Kharif season. But he does not depend entirely on the natural factors like rainfall, sunshine and the climate. So the final product what he obtained from cultivating the crop is that cotton. So cotton is a natural product. Another example is that dairy. He or the man depends on the biological process of the animals and the availability of fodder. So the final product what he obtained is a milk. So milk is a natural product. So what is primary sector? When we produce a good by exploiting natural resources, we used to say it as a primary sector. So this primary sector, why we say it as a primary? Why we say it as a primary? The reason is that it forms the base for all other products that we subsequently make. Primary sector, why we say it as primary? Because it forms the base for all other products that we subsequently make. As we obtained different products from agriculture, dairy, fishing, forestry, this primary sector can also be called as agriculture and related sector. So as we obtain natural products mostly from agriculture, fishing, dairy, forestry, this primary sector can also be called as agriculture and related sector. So the second economic activity, we used to say it as secondary activities. So this secondary activities, what do you mean by secondary activities? The activities activities in which natural products are changed into other forms through the ways of manufacturing that we associate with industrial activity. In simple words, the process of converting the natural products, that is raw material, into a finished products with the help of machineries. It takes place in secondary activities. For example, as we have seen cotton cultivation in the primary sector, that cotton, raw cotton, is converted into yarn, which is again converted into a cloth. So the process involved here is ginning, spinning, weaving. So all these activities are carried out in industrial area. So this activity, secondary activity, can also be called as an industrial sector. Secondary activities can also be called as an industrial sector as the process of manufacturing takes place. The third activity is the tertiary sector. So this tertiary sector supports the primary sector as well as the secondary sector, and it helps in the development of it. So this activity, this sector, doesn't produce any production, but it acts as an aid or a support for the production process. So this tertiary sector, example, can be of transport, communication, banking and trade. As it acts as an aid or support for the production process, this tertiary sector also generates services rather than goods. So this can be called as a service sector also. So tertiary sector can also be called as service sector. For example, ATM, anytime money, teachers, doctors and cobblers, they does a service to the people. So tertiary sector can also be called as a service sector as it generates services rather than goods. As we have seen three sectors, primary, secondary and tertiary sector, now we will see comparing the three sectors, primary sector, secondary sector and the tertiary sector. How these three sectors, they contribute to GDP. So GDP is that gross domestic product. So what do you mean by GDP? The value of final goods and services produced in each sector during a particular year provides the total production of that sector for that year. So what do you mean by GDP? The total value of final goods and services produced within a particular year. So we can say the sum of production in three sectors, primary, secondary and tertiary, as GDP. So sum of production in three sectors, that is primary sector, secondary sector and the tertiary sector, as GDP. So before we calculate GDP, first we should know what do you mean by goods. In economics, goods are materials that satisfy human wants and provide utility. Goods are nothing but the materials that satisfy human wants and provide utility. Intermediate goods are the goods that are used in producing final goods and services. Tea dust, milk and sugar is used to prepare tea. So tea dust, milk and sugar, they come under the category of intermediate goods. Final goods are the goods that is used for final consumption. Goods that are used for final consumption, we used to say it as final goods. Example, tea. Now we'll see how do we count various goods in each sector for calculating GDP. So we know GDP is the total value of final goods and services produced within a particular territory. So which sector contributes to GDP? It is the sum of production of all the three sectors. So to get better result in GDP, we have to count only the final goods and services and not the intermediate goods. Why is it so? Because the reason is that the value of intermediate goods makes the market value for the final product. So when you go to a hotel, you have been served by a cup of tea or a coffee. The goods used to produce it are tea powder or tea dust, milk and sugar. All these tea dust, milk and sugar, they come under the category of intermediate goods, since they form a part of the final good, the cup of tea. So one way to measure the market value of the cup of tea is to add the value produced by each intermediate good used to produce it. Each intermediate good, the tea powder, milk and sugar, adds value to the final output, that is the cup of tea. So each intermediate good adds its value to the final output, that is tea. So market value of tea is only included in the GDP calculations. If we include the value of tea dust, the value of milk and the value of sugar to the GDP, again and again the counting adds up for GDP. So it is not the correct value to calculate the GDP. So when you add the market value of tea in GDP calculation, the double or triple counting is avoided. Double or triple counting is avoided. So we have to add only the market value of tea to calculate the GDP. So which organization estimates the GDP? It is undertaken by the central government industry under the organization of CSO and the NSSO. CSO is the Central Statistics Office and NSSO is the National Sample Survey Organization under the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, which is undertaken by the central government industry. Now we will see the historical changes which took place in all the three sectors. So we know that primary sector is one of the most important sector of the economical activity. The initial stages of the development in any country takes place or took place with the help of the primary sector. So primary sector was considered the most important sector of the economic activity. But in that primary sector, the modern farming method, for example in agriculture activities, the agriculture sector started beginning to prosper because of modern farming. Example, we can say it as Green Revolution program. So the production of food has been increased. When the production of particular food crop increased, automatically people can take up other activities. So buying and selling activities may increase many times. Apart from that, transporters, administrators, etc. may increase. So most of the people, they started involving in the primary sector, and the secondary sector, goods produced from the primary sectors as the primary products have increased, there arises more production in the secondary sector where there is more requirement for employment. Over the past 100 years, there has been a further shift from the secondary sector towards the tertiary sector in most of the developed countries. The service sector has become the most important in terms of total production. Most of the working people are also employed in the service sector. As we have seen the historical changes which took place from primary to secondary and from secondary to tertiary sector, now we will see the contribution of these sectors in the GDP through their production of goods and services, So the first graph, it shows about the production of goods and services in these three sectors for the 2 years, that is from 1973 to 74 and from 2013 to 14. So the production of goods and services from all the three sectors when compared to 2 years, 1973 to 74 and 2013 to 14, we can see a lot of changes. Lot of increase in the production of goods and services. So there is an increase of primary sector, increase of production of goods and services in all the three sectors, primary, secondary and tertiary, in the year 2013 to 14. The next graph it shows about the percentage of increase in the production. The percentage of production in the year 1973 to 74 and 2013 to 14. It is observed that the primary sector has declined its share. Primary sector has declined its share to the GDP, whereas the secondary sector and the tertiary sector has increased its share in the production. From this, it is observed that there is a shift from the primary sector to the secondary sector and from the secondary sector to the tertiary sector. So we can see the tertiary sector is becoming more important in India. Not only in India, in all countries of the world. But what is the reason for the tertiary sector becoming so important in India over the years? The reason is that, the first reason is that government support. Any country requires basic services like hospitals, educational institutions, post and telegraph services, police stations, village administrative officers, municipal corporation, defense, transport, banks, insurance companies, etc. So all these services may be called as basic services. So in a developing country like India, the government has to take the responsibility for the provision of these services. So these services require the government support. The second reason may be growth in primary and the secondary sector. The development of agriculture and industry leads to the development of services such as transport, trade, storage and the like. The third reason may be income level rises. When the income level rises, automatically the people start demanding more services like eating out, tourism, shopping, private hospitals, private schools, professional training, etc., which indicates change in their lifestyle. The fourth reason is that need of information and communication technology. So all these four reasons says that there is a rising importance of the tertiary sector. Now we'll see where are most of the people employed. From this graph, it is clearly understood that even though the production of goods and services has been declined in the primary sector in the following years, but we can see the employment is seen more in the primary sector. Even though the tertiary sector has raised, even though the tertiary sector has been raised here, the employment is seen more in the primary sector. So when the employment is seen more in the primary sector, it leads to unemployment. What do you mean by unemployment? A situation in which those who are able and willing to work at the prevailing wage rate, they do not find a job. That is what we say it as an unemployment. So we can see more number of people employed in the primary sector, which leads to underemployment. More people when they are engaged in work than necessary. So when more people are engaged in the primary sector, but at a certain period of time, when they have been removed out, the production will not be affected. So those people, they come under the category of underemployed. So disguised unemployment. This case takes place particularly in agriculture sector when more people are engaged in some activity than the number of persons required. So those group of people, they come under the category of disguised unemployment. Now we'll see the different ways to create more employment in the rural areas. How we can create more employment in the rural areas. The first step, the government can invest in the infrastructural development. The government can invest infrastructural development of the village. They can provide transport and communication in the rural areas. They can also promote small-scale industries in the rural areas. Agricultural product processing units can be set up nearby the village. Opening up of the cooperative banks and the provision of easy and quick loans can also create employment. So what are the various ways to create more employment in the rural area is that the government should support first. The government should invest in the infrastructural development. Provision of transport and communication has to be done. They have to promote and locate industries and services in the rural areas. Agricultural product processing units can be set up. Opening up of cooperative banks and the provision of easy and quick loans. When all this is carried out by government, they can create employment, more employment. Apart from that, how can we create more employment in the semi-rural areas? Setting up of dal mills to procure and process, and even selling of the product. Opening a cold storage. Honey collection centers, and by setting up industries to process vegetables and agriculture produce. So there are different ways to create employment more into semi-rural areas. We can set up dal mills to procure and process the products and even selling of products. Opening a cold storage to protect the crops or the vegetables. Honey collection centers to collect the honey from all the areas of semi-rural. Setting up industries to process vegetables and agriculture produce. When we carry out all these activities, employment is generated more in number. Apart from rural and the semi-rural areas, we can increase employment opportunities in the urban areas. How is it so? First, we have to reform the educational system. We have to reform the educational system. So, vocational education to be carried out at the school stage. Vocational, that is, skill-based education should be carried out at the school stage. Concrete action has to be carried out to promote decentralization and dispersal of industrial activity. Concrete action has to be carried out to promote decentralization and dispersal of industrial activity. We have to promote the small-scale industries and encourage self-employment by banks. Develop techniques of production with low capital intensity. Provision of infrastructure like roadways, railways, hospitals, schools, which will not only create employment opportunities, but they also contribute to the development of the nation. So when we reform the educational system, when we take a concrete action to promote decentralization, to promote small-scale industries, if self-employment is encouraged, develop techniques of production with low capital intensity, and when the infrastructure is developed, automatically we can create more employment opportunities in the urban areas, which leads to the development of nation. So here NREGA. What is NREGA? That is National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, which has been established in the year 2005. So this act has been passed for all those who are able to work and are in need of work, are guaranteed 100 days of employment in a year by the government. Even if the government fails its duty to promote employment, it will give unemployment allowances to the people. So that is what NREGA. It has been implemented. The law implemented the right to work in 200 districts of India, and it has been extended to the additional 130 districts. So the remaining districts in rural areas were brought under the act with effect from 1st April 2008. So that act came to be known as NREGA. So later it came to be known as MNREGA, that is Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. Another way of classifying activities in the economy is based on the employment. Here we are going to see how the people have been employed. What are their conditions of work? Are there any rules and regulations followed as regards their employment? So on the basis of employment, sectors can be classified into organized sector and unorganized sector. Organized sector are the enterprises or places of work where the terms of employment are regular and they have been secured. Whereas unorganized sector are small and scattered units which are not under the control of the government. They have been paid low and they are unsecure. So now we'll see the comparison of organized sector and the unorganized sector. Organized sector are the enterprises which have been registered by the government. Unorganized sector are the enterprises which is not under the control of the government. In organized sector, rules and regulations are followed, whereas in unorganized sector, no rules and regulations are followed. So the people who are working in the organized sector, they feel secured in their job and they have been paid according to the prescribed scale. Whereas the people who are under unorganized sector, they have irregular jobs and they have been paid less wages. So in organized sector, the people work for a fixed hours of time and they have been paid if they do any extra overtime work. Whereas the people who are in unorganized sector, there is no fixed working hours and there is no provision for overtime. And even if there is provision for overtime, no extra payment is paid for them. The people of organized sector, they get the benefits like provident fund, gratuity, medical benefits, paid leaves, etc. But the people who are working under the sector, unorganized sector, they don't get such benefits where the organized sector people get. So sectors are classified on the basis of employment as organized sector and the unorganized sector. Now we'll see the sector, how this unorganized sector should be protected. There are certain measures to protect the unorganized sector both in rural areas as well as in the urban areas. In rural areas, landless agricultural laborers, small and marginal farmers, sharecroppers and the artisans and more have to be protected. How they can be protected? Timely delivery of seed, storage facilities, marketing outlets. So in the rural areas, the landless agricultural laborers, small and marginal farmers, sharecroppers and artisans have to be protected by the timely delivery of seed, storage facilities, marketing outlets. In the urban areas, workers in the small-scale industries, casual workers in construction, street vendors, etc., they have to be protected. How they can be protected? The government has to support them. Government has to support them. So both in rural areas and the urban areas, the government should play a very important role to protect these people. Now we'll see how the sector is classified on the basis of ownership. So on the basis of ownership, the sector can be classified as public sector and the private sector. So what do you mean by public sector? The government owns most of the assets and provides all the services. So such sector has been operated only by the government. Example, BHEL, SAIL. BHEL is Bharat Heavy Electricals Limited. SAIL is the Steel Authority of India Limited. So all these are the services produced by the government. Whereas private sector, what do you mean by private sector is that the industries which are owned and operated by individuals or group of individuals. So the main aim of this private sector is to make profit. Example, Reliance Industries, TISCO, Tata Iron and Steel Company Limited. So the aim of the public sector is to do service, whereas the aim of the private sector is to make profit. So on the basis of ownership, the sectors are classified as public sector and the private sector. So in these concepts, we have learned how the sectors of Indian economy has been classified on the basis of the nature of activity as primary sector, secondary sector, tertiary sector. On the basis of employment, we have seen organized sector and the unorganized sector. And on the basis of ownership, we have seen about the public sector and the private sector. So, and what is GDP we have seen and how these sectors have contributed to the GDP of India. So here you can test yourself by going through all the concepts. How are economic activities classified? Why tertiary sector becoming so important in India? How to create employment in rural areas and semi-rural areas? Distinguish between organized and unorganized sector. In what ways sectors of economy are classified on the basis of ownership? Explain. So if you like this video, you can like it, comment it and share it. Thank you.